Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Samantha Otto Brown. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good
I,
to talk.
I'm so glad you are here, and I would love for you to start with how'd you get into writing?
Okay, I think I was born and then everything else happened. Really, I grew up with my parents and my grandparents who were both they were all big into reading, especially my grandparents, and we lived with them for a little bit, and I was never denied a story. I was never denied one more story. I got spoiled with books and library trips, and one thing led to another. I started writing my own. I think the first quote unquote book that I did was a spiral notebook when I was 6 or 7 years old. And it's really spiraled out of control from there.
I love that spiraled out of control, but it was already bound for you. So that was one less step you had to
It
contend
was
with.
really like 10 out of 10 for the self publishing process on that one.
I love that so much. I love that so much. So this love of writing, this love of reading, it had to extend obviously beyond this first published work, this first published notebook work. So would you continue with that?
I did a lot on my own in middle school, kind of growing up. I don't remember if we had a creative writing program in middle school. I don't think we did. I would always do like writing or art classes in the summers though. And in high school, I took creative writing with some friends. And then in college, I was able to actually go to workshops and do classes. I started out with fiction, and then I know I had a weird like schedule opening. I had a weird or schedule conflict my second semester, my freshman year, and I took nonfiction because it was all that could fit in my schedule. I couldn't fit intermediate fiction or something, and man, that clicked. That made so much sense to me, and it really it built on this knowledge. I had a few English teachers in high school who were so supportive of my writing process and encouraged me to go to contests and practice new things. And this just clicked with everything they taught me. I fell in love with it, took the beginner, intermediate, and advanced courses, did my honors in creative writing, and I couldn't get away from it. And then when I graduated, I really didn't think a grad school degree, especially in writing, was for me because I married a guy who was in the military and we were going to be moving, but the University of Missouri checks up on its alumni every 2 years, or maybe even a year and a half after graduation, just to see in the English department specifically where you've ended up, or if you have any questions, or what you're doing with your degree. And so I got a call from my capstone professor, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm working for a jeweler in South Carolina, doing like sales and a couple blog posts, but I wish I could do my master's right now." And she said, "Have you heard of low residency?" And I said, "No, tell me more." And one thing led to another, and I ended up applying for and getting into Queen's University of Charlotte in their nonfiction program, which was just a wonderful, small, I would say there were maybe 20 of us in this cohort. And it was workshop based, it was writing based, it was network based. And I had the time of my life getting my low residency MFA there. And that manuscript is what eventually became my first book, Subwife.
Oh, okay. You have hit on so many things I would love to unpack. One
Okay.
of which is that so what I'm hearing though is a blend, not just a love of writing, but you took creative writing and then you also really focused it in nonfiction. But how did that creative writing experience strengthen your nonfiction writing skills?
Well, we read a lot. I know that shouldn't surprise anybody, but we read so much, and we did seminars every day on what is this book? Why is it working? What creative things, what creative liberties can you take with reality that can make it something worth appreciating, can make it literary, can make it beyond just like, I'm going to tell you the story from point A to point B. What techniques can we employ? And as much as I like to say, like, I will never write fiction. I know I will someday. At Queens, we had a really strong cross genre approach, which is one of the things that drew me to the genre, where every nonfiction writer also took courses in poetry, fiction, and screenwriting so that we could see all the similarities and get practice with them. And we would work with professors in every genre. And really, by the end, there were no hard lines between genres. It was like, okay, you have fiction that's actually reality that's kind of disguised, or you have reality that has fictional elements, and just the way to work with the words and the concepts so that you are not telling the truth, but you're telling it in a way that is beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love how you describe that because I mean, the elements, the techniques, the things that you're thinking about. I mean, even so with my background with journalism, we were taught the inverted pyramid because you're thinking of things above the fold. And so at the very pointy end of the pyramid that's inverted, that's going to drop below the fold. So you wanted the most important things up top. But that logic still applies with other types of writing. So I love how you've described that, the technique and how those pieces can kind of blend forward. So to your point, you wrote a book, and this book stemmed from a lot of experience with working through the MFA. But how did you know you wanted to publish the works that you did from the MFA versus saying, this helped me to strengthen my writing in general?
Um, it rewinds back to an essay that I wrote in my undergrad, in my intermediate fiction or nonfiction course, excuse me, with my professor, Lauren Fath, who actually just published her first memoir like a few months ago. She introduced me to the concept of a lyrical essay, a lyric essay. And I wrote this lyric essay about who was then my boyfriend. He was in ROTC at the same university, and he was joining the Navy. And I had big feelings about it. I was not team Navy, to say it in very few words. And I wrote this kind of a vignette-based lyric essay that I ended up publishing in Pank magazine because Roxane Gay, who was the editor at the time, was working with my intern class at the Missouri Review Literary Journal. And I asked her some questions after our discussion. She said, send it to me. And so I published this little, maybe 20 Microsoft Word double-spaced pages of this essay that I wrote. And it was one of those things that never left me alone. And it was a concept that when I started my MFA, I went back to, and it was one of those things where I had enough time with the concept to know that this is something that this matters enough to me, and it has enough universality that I want it to go the step further and not just be a thesis. And in the end, the thesis is about 60% of the finished book because more happens after, and every revision, it changes a little.
Absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, one of the things you just hit on is really important with is it's distance. And sometimes it's space, it's time, it's another way to put it is permission to say, okay, I need to put this down and I need to walk away from it because it's too fresh. It might be a wound. And even if it's not a physical wound, it might be an emotional wound. It might be just something that's a little too jarring to write. So you have to take some steps away from it before you can actually write it with a little bit more distance and feel like I can handle this and not feel emotional or not feel frustrated or whatever that comes up. And even when it's happy writing, even when it's joyful writing, that break that you take to see if that concept is still working, see if that the way it's structured is working, those breaks are helpful. And you really have to give yourself permission to take them at times. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Permission to take the breaks, which is something that I've been living the kind of like baptism by fire of that since becoming a mom, which that was like 4 years ago, but still it feels like yesterday. The objectivity you gain by taking space from the event you want to write about, whether that be through poetry, fiction, or nonfiction, but I feel like especially nonfiction, since it is literally your life or literally a person you know's life, hypothetically. It's one of those things that we don't talk about enough in the creative writing world. I feel like there's the kind of the, I don't want to say edict, but I'm not getting the correct word. Maybe it's the thing that we all get tattooed on our brains is you have to write every day. And the concept that was introduced to me in the MFA by a professor who was also a mother said you should do something writerly every day. But, don't beat yourself up if you don't sit down and crank out 1,000 words, especially in nonfiction. You have to live the life in order to write about it. Even if you're writing about someone else, if you're the kind of writer who sits and doesn't engage with the world or interact with the world or go do quote unquote real life things or outside things, you aren't going to have that good perspective. So taking breaks from writing to gain perspective and objectivity on your subject is invaluable. And that is something that I struggle to want to do. So even then, I haven't written anything of substance in probably a year, but I haven't stopped taking notes. I haven't stopped observing. I haven't stopped putting together things. I have a really embarrassing box in my office at work where I just have like little essay scraps or like ideas. And if I think of them at work, I know I can't act on them at work. I can write them down, put them in my box, and eventually I will dump that box into my backpack and take it home and work on it. But right now it's just a scary box on my bookshelf.
But, so what I'm hearing are a few things there that, uh, and even if it's whether you're at a different job or you're doing something else, I can't tell you how many times I'm doing something else, like making dinner or out running errands, and something hits me, and I'll turn my phone on and record, some sort of message of, all right, this is what's coming up. I need to make sure I include or what have you. If I'm editing somebody else's piece, that piece is on my mind too. And out of nowhere, I'm like, I need to go see if such and such is doing thus and so or what have you. So it comes up in editing, it comes up in writing, but when you do take those breaks and you're willing to capture the little nuggets when they come up, you you have been working. You just haven't been sitting there pen to paper writing something, but you have been working because it's marinating, it's processing, and that's just as important.
And I don't know if you're like me, like, for example, you get up, you take a walk, or you go do something physical. Sometimes those ideas that get stuck, they just start to move again.
Mhm.
I know the treadmill and the pool are like very dangerous places to be if I don't have like my phone or something I can like jump off and write with. It's like this morning I went and my phone was like low on battery, and I was like, I have ideas, but we're not going to think about them because I don't have time or an implement to like record anything. And if I have to try to remember it, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna stick. It's very dangerous.
Yes, yes, I love it. I love it. That's great. So when you were writing, so you've got the thesis, but now you need to work it through. You've decided you're going to write a book.
Mhm.
So you have basically a really solid start, but revisions need to happen. More needs to be added for context, or because, like you said, life was happening. There's some other parts to embody this story more so. So, what was that like transitioning from I've gotten so much to I have to add more? Did it feel like it flowed easily, or did it feel like you needed to kind of reset a little on how that writing took place?
Well, I kind of got one of those like the universe forced me to put it down for a little bit.
Okay.
When I graduated from my MFA with that thesis that became my book, I was like 8 or 9 weeks pregnant, and I was extremely sick. I was not loving that first trimester life. And so pretty much the whole summer after I graduated, I spent napping and watching Bravo. And so I didn't think about the thesis at all. And by the time my daughter was born, I was like, oh yeah, I'll totally pick that up and start again. No, I had no idea. That was my first child. I was blissfully naive about what I would have the mental capacity to do. So I ended up taking a good solid year and a half away from that book. And in that time, a lot of life happened. I mean, obviously, parenthood, we moved from Florida to Kansas, which we did kind of in stages, and I did with our daughter by myself. I think maybe our daughter, I don't even remember. Like that's the bliss of forgetfulness, is I barely remember that move, thank God. Yeah, I think it was the three of us. It was me, the baby, and the pit bull. And it gave me time and space. So by the time we were settling in, I still remember where I was sitting at the house in the basement on this desk I set up, thinking I would watch the baby play and write books at the same time. I think I sat at the desk twice. Um, and I reached out to the woman who became my agent and said, would you be interested in reading this? Because she had a similar military background to my story. She's a Marine, and she does literary agency now. And she did, and she gave me some feedback and kind of told me where she would recommend adding, where she would recommend cutting. And then I made a few more of my own cuts that I don't think I would have been able to do if I hadn't taken a year and a half away from the work itself, because that was the all consuming work for the time. And, even now it's been a year at the time we're filming this, it's been almost exactly a year since the book came out. And I look at it now and I'm like, I would write this completely differently now. Like, if given the chance, if every copy and file were lost, I would rewrite this. It would be completely different. I could publish it under a different name and no one would know. It changes over time. And the difficulty in accepting that has been kind of interesting, especially with conversations with readers that I've had since then.
So I love what we've been talking about with this, the distance and how, I mean, the fact that it was forced, if so to speak, and I say
Mhm.
forced gently, because
Yeah, yeah.
but things happened. Life came into play where you needed to honor that season. That season looked different. And so transitioning back and recognizing that you were in a different season, a different space, ready to do that writing, and then ready to get it out into the world. And even though you might look at it differently, that's still going back to the space, going back to saying, it's okay for me to take this space and looking at this piece and saying, what else can I do? You
Mhm.
might, even if you were to take it and turn it on its head from another perspective, it would give it another like slant, like a crosshatch version. And it still would be a really cool experience, to
Mhm.
create, to read. So one of the things I'm hearing, and I would love for you to talk about some, is balance. Really the balancing of following a goal, following a dream, and life, and you know at being a parent or having a job, like all of these other elements that come into play, where it's just not as simple as saying, well, I'm going to write today. When you are writing, and especially with memoir, emotions come up and you need to tend to those emotions as well as handle the writing and recognize, if this is coming up this much for me to write right now, this is a really good indicator that I just needed to get it out on the page, and then deliberately walk away and know that I got to come back and look at this. So would you talk about the balancing, like how you worked through that? What tips you might have for a writer who is struggling with balance?
Struggling with balance, I could get a PhD in that. I'm just not good at balancing. I I think the best thing that a writer, any writer can do, no matter what their genre, if they're struggling with balance, is to go as far back to the basics as they can. For me, I thought that was jumping straight into writing again, writing small pieces, writing poems, writing whatever's. I tried to do flash nonfiction for a hot minute, and that was, I guess I was not ready for that. It was not pretty, but I like to go back to the basics. And for me, that started with just reading voraciously and whatever I felt like, no rules. For a long time, my reading list was determined by researching for my book or learning a new industry, or I read a lot of like craft books to learn about the differences between style guides. Do not recommend for entertainment, but for education it's great. um I did I just started reading whatever I wanted. There's the, I'm sure everybody who listens knows this, but Libby, the free audiobook app, that is how I do 99% of my reading now. And for a long time I wouldn't read anything except nonfiction. I would read very serious, educational, hard hitting, journalism based books. And out of nowhere, I decided very recently that I was going to start reading the really popular stuff, the books that people are talking about. I'm like, what is so popular about this new genre? Contemporary romance is huge. I started reading these books and I was like, this is enjoyable. This is fun. I don't think I could ever write one, but this is fun. And just letting myself enjoy the very basic pleasure of reading again. And then I think for me, a big turning point was just not knowing I was waiting for that inspiration to start again. And when my old professor published her book, I went to her virtual reading. I listened. Actually, we didn't make it home in time, so I was listening to it in the car on my phone, like noise canceling, and listening to her read again put me right back in that creative space that I was in college when I had so few commitments other than to my work and to myself really. And being able to re-access that, just listening to my professor read her work, it was like, I'm ready to start again. I know what I want to do. And really, since then, nothing has felt forced because I took a break, let myself experience new things and old things with just kind of a lot of joy and wonder. It has made all the difference. And, you know, it's just, I can't even express how much it's changed how I look at writing day to day, because I work with writing all day, every day, not my own. And it's so much more fun to take a break and know that I can come back to this whenever I want and it's going to be okay.
I love that. I love that so much, because you're right. When you are working with so many different writing, whether you are an editor and you're looking at someone else, but you also write your own, or you're writing different types of pieces. So yes, you might be working on your book or several pieces of WIP, depending upon which WIP is grabbed your attention at that moment. Or as a writer, you're running a business and there are lots of other pieces that you're writing that is not specific in that moment to the manuscript. It's tangential, but it's not that manuscript. It could be a blog post, it could be social media, it could be a lot of social media, it could be so many other elements, emails, sequences, all of those kinds of things that come up that you are writing. You're just not writing the manuscript or working on the manuscript. So I love that you said that, because there is that spark that can help. But when you're writing those other types of pieces, the social and working on WIP,
Mhm.
how would you suggest managing that? Or like, what kind of tips would you offer? Because sometimes when you're writing so many different pieces, you could teeter into a form of burnout, because it's like, where else am I going to, I just have so much I need to
Yeah.
working. And
Yes.
then there's life.
Yes, it's that empty cup thing. You can't pour from it, which I think that's like the most overused phrase for really any working professional woman, especially. I think the bet, so for a little background, once I knew my book was going to be published, or maybe even about when it started going out to query publishing houses, I started a website and I started a social media presence. And that's one of those things, if I could rewind, I would start it years sooner. I would do it completely differently. That's like almost an entire another podcast of me just kicking myself for not listening to everybody ahead of me who said, if you want to be noticed, if you want your book to be noticed, you need a social media presence, like a strong one from the get go. And I know so many writers who are my age, older, younger, who are like, that's so stupid. You don't need that. I was you, and I regret not getting that, at least getting used to the concept of self promotion on social media, self marketing from an author's perspective. I wish I'd gotten used to that sooner, because now I feel like if I don't post something every day, either promoting my book, reviewing another book, or just like sharing moments from the life of a professional writer, I am failing my book. I am failing myself. And the biggest antidote, I don't have the silver bullet, but the biggest antidote I found is just community with other writers who share a similar perspective. I have made connections with a few wonderful writers. One of them is Joyce Hankins of Moonshadow Press. She's an old friend of mine, and she's a writer and artist. And we've commiserated about the miseries and the stresses of social media promotion and just feeling completely out of the algorithm. Like, how do we trick the algorithm into making people look at us? How do we get how do you go viral? How do you force that? Which sounds terrible, but and also Julie Tully, who just recently published Dispatches from the Cowgirl. She and I, we we have lots of plans for how to support each other in this, because she is also in that first year of the book, heavy promotion, and it can burn you out very quickly. And I'm going to test in a few weeks. By the time this airs, I will have completed the test of what it's going to be like to take a week off. My daughter is having just a minor surgery, and she'll be home with me for a week. So I've decided no social media. It's going to be an unplugged week, except for we're going to watch Frozen probably twice a day. That's going to be great. Just because I don't know many authors who have found a wonderful balance, unless they're just not sharing it. Maybe they have, and I just haven't listened because I can't look at another article on my phone about here's how I made my book go viral on TikTok, which I know some authors and writers do an incredible job using that platform. I love to get lost on it and spend hours on it. I have not cracked the code on how to make it so universal that it goes crazy yet, but I really enjoy seeing what people do. And every time I get on, I start to feel more like a dinosaur. Like, I don't actually know how to do that thing. So then you have to Google how to do that thing. And the burnout can be shockingly overwhelming for something so low stakes as promoting an indie published book on social media. It can feel overwhelming. So I think you got to find your burnout buddy. You got to have your battle buddy. And you got to maybe practice taking a break. Maybe give yourself a goal. Like, every 3 months, I'll take a week off, or I won't post on Sundays. You got to find your boundaries and set them, which is so much easier said than done.
True, true. But, it really goes back to what we were talking about earlier with figuring out what you're willing to give yourself permission for, or recognizing this is where you need permission, whether it's grace and like, I need this break from the book, or even saying, like you said, starting small. I won't post on weekends. that's the
Mhm.
best. That's something I know what they say, and I'm going to do that. Or recognizing what social outlets, what social media platforms really resonate with you, and then do your best to do well with those versus feeling like you have to be everywhere, just focusing on where you excel. And because that's going to get your best in that way. But you're right that sometimes there can be that feeling of so much going on, and how do you get it all done?
And comparing yourself to other people who are doing incredible and just mind blowing things. You're like, I did not know we could do that. I did not know that was an option available to us. And trying to be inspired by, but not discouraged by them simultaneously, which I should probably go to therapy and work on that. But that's a lot of time, you know?
But that's a great point though, because sometimes what you're observing is one, it's exciting watching someone do well because it's like, hey,
Mhm.
if they can do that, I can too idea. And the other side is studying, going, what was working with that? What
Mhm.
is working? And even if it's in a different platform, how might you try that? And does it, and then also giving yourself permission to say, just because I tried it doesn't mean it was something I enjoyed. So, like, if you're treating it all as like an experiment and saying, well, what happens if I do this? Oh, okay, that worked or that didn't work. And looking at it like that, it might also take some pressure off because it feels fun and curious versus like, oh, I've got to go do this. If you say, I get to go do this, I get to play and see what this happens, just that
Exactly.
shift of language also can help.
Yeah, I think Ann Patchett writes about similar topics. I can't remember which memoir. It's not the most recent one. It's not These Precious Days. It's one of the earlier memoirs or essays that she's done. I want to say it's from This Is the Story of a Happy Marriage, from the book, not that essay. But I feel like she talks about this, and especially when she was opening Parnassus Books, that I think there was a lot of that same theme where it's like it could be stressful, but I'm going to approach it with I get to do this. What a cool opportunity! What a great way to kind of save the traditional bookstore. And now I think I should reread that. Maybe I should just check that out again.
Oh, but I love what you've shared because you're right that, you know, when you're working on something that's creative or when you're writing is personal until, and then even when you're choosing to share it, even when it's published, it started out as something very intimate, very personal, but it's between you and that page until you start to decide, I now need to shift this or I need more help if I'm going to move it forward in another way. But it's still a very intimate process, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And when it's memoir, it's very personal because you're sifting and you're processing different things while also thinking about how do I make this, as you said, universal.
Mhm.
And, you know, but I love what you're saying because it's really talking about how you balance all of those pieces, recognizing you're not going to get it right all the time. And that's okay. It's frustrating when you don't, but it's also, you're human. You
Mhm.
did something, you did do something. You can at least go back and go, oh, well, how did that work? And assess it for like the process, not necessarily like I did that. And that's what I'm hearing is that you're the grace that you are extending and that writers ought to consider extending to themselves
Mhm.
too.
Yes, I would love to see more, especially authors who, I guess maybe this is an indicator of my age, my era in life, my age band. When you click the what age group are you on your dental health forms and such. I've been interacting with so many full fledged adults, hypothetically, who are professionals in their field. Maybe they're doctors, maybe they're teachers, maybe they're police officers, and they're saying, I started writing a book the other day, or I have this idea and I've been working on it, and I don't know, maybe it's just nothing, maybe it's something. I'm like, well, you're doing it though, like you're doing the thing, you're doing the, like this is the worst part of it, is like first draft, first edit, like, oh my gosh, you're in the gross part of it right now, but you're doing it. Like, congratulations, this is huge. And I would love to see authors, especially of the that you're like you're middle age, you're young middle age, you're middle age, whatever you are. This kind of like, I didn't do this in college. This isn't this isn't what brings home my paycheck, but I'm super enjoying trying this for the first time. And I would love to see more first time authors in, not the first stage trying it and enjoying it for what it is before they get to the part that for me is like, I work in marketing, but I don't, it does not come natural to me like writing does, the joy in it. I would love to see more people experiencing that joy so that they have that to fall back on when it gets hard eventually, because I believe they will all find success. I have no indicators telling me they won't find success, that they won't complete it, that they won't, even have that one chapter that's just like, I did this right. It's a huge sense of accomplishment. And I'd love to see more first time writers just experience it with joy and with grace in equal parts.
Oh, I love that. Sam, this has been awesome. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get Subwife?
Okay, so socially, or just for my, if you want to watch all of my TikTok fails, I'm on Instagram. It is Samantha Otto Brown _writer. I have a website, samanthaautobrown.com. I'm also on TikTok as Samantha Otto Brown. My book is available wherever you buy books. If Amazon is your jam, you can go for Amazon. Actually, my book will be on my website. It's at Barnes and Noble. IndieBound, you can order through if you like to do it online. If you like to walk and visit your local indie bookshop, you can go in. And if you like signed copies, reach out to me on social media. I live like next door to a post office, so I ship pretty quick.
That is awesome. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.